Somewhere in the ocean right now, drifting through the dark like a speck of glass, there is an animal that scientists genuinely struggle to call mortal. It is smaller than your little fingernail. It has no brain, no heart, no bones, and a body that is almost entirely water. And yet this fragile little thing appears to have quietly solved the one problem that every other living creature on this planet eventually loses to. It does not grow old and die the way the rest of us do. When life turns against it, it simply refuses to end. It rewinds. This is the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii. And by the time we are finished, you will understand exactly what that word immortal really means for this animal, and, just as importantly, what it does not mean. Because the truth is stranger and more careful than the headlines, and it might just be one of the most quietly astonishing tricks in all of biology. Let's start by shrinking your expectations, because the first surprise about this creature is how small and how ordinary it looks. If you were snorkeling right over one, you would almost certainly never notice it. A fully grown immortal jellyfish is only about 4.5 millimeters across. That is smaller than a grain of rice standing on its end. Its bell is transparent, a delicate dome you could see straight through, and inside it you can often spot a bright red stomach glowing at the center like a tiny lantern. Around the rim there can be dozens upon dozens of fine, hair-like tentacles, sometimes as many as 90 in a mature adult, trailing out to catch food. Young ones start life with only a handful. It drifts on the currents, it pulses gently through the water, and it hunts the same way its relatives do, snaring even tinier prey with stinging cells. In almost every way, it looks and behaves like a completely normal, forgettable little jellyfish, which is exactly what makes what it can do so hard to believe. To understand the trick, you first need to understand the ordinary story, the life that every jellyfish is supposed to live, and it is a life that only runs in one direction. It begins when a fertilized egg becomes a tiny swimming larva, a fuzzy little oval called a planula, drifting until it finds a solid surface on the seafloor. There it settles, anchors itself down, and grows into something that looks nothing like a jellyfish at all. It becomes a polyp, a small stalk rooted to the rock, a bit like a miniature sea anemone. That polyp can bud and branch into a little colony, and then, when conditions are right, it does something remarkable of its own. It buds off tiny baby jellyfish, which swim away, grow up, and become the graceful, pulsing medusa, the free-floating adult we all picture when we hear the word jellyfish. The adult breeds, releases the next generation of eggs and sperm, and then, like almost everything else alive, it ages, it weakens, and it dies. Egg to larva, larva to polyp, polyp to medusa, medusa to death. That is the road. Every jellyfish is meant to travel it in one direction only, from beginning to end, and never look back. And here is where Turritopsis dohrnii tears up the map. Because when this particular jellyfish runs into serious trouble, it does the one thing that road is not supposed to allow. It goes backwards. Imagine the animal is starving, or it has been injured, or the water has turned too warm or too cold, or it is simply reaching the end of its adult life and beginning to fail. For almost any other creature, that is the final chapter. But the immortal jellyfish responds to that crisis in a way that sounds almost impossible. Its bell begins to shrink and collapse. Its tentacles pull in and are reabsorbed. The whole graceful adult body deflates into a small, shapeless blob of tissue that sinks down and settles onto the seafloor. And there, instead of dying, that blob reorganizes itself and grows back into a polyp, the young, rooted stage it left behind long ago. From that polyp, brand new jellyfish can bud off once again. In other words, this animal can take itself from the adult stage all the way back to the beginning of its own life cycle, the way a butterfly might somehow melt back into a caterpillar. It hits reset, it becomes young again. But how? How does a fully grown, specialized adult body simply become a completely different, younger form? This is the part that genuinely stuns the scientists who study it, and it has a name: transdifferentiation. Now, every complex animal is built from many different kinds of cells, each with a specific job. Muscle cells contract, nerve cells carry signals, skin cells cover and protect. And normally, once a cell has grown up and committed to being one particular type, that decision is permanent. A muscle cell stays a muscle cell for the rest of its life. What the immortal jellyfish does is break that rule. During its reversal, its already specialized mature cells transform directly into entirely different types of cells. A cell that was doing one job rewrites itself and takes up a completely new one, as if a bricklayer could reach into their own body and rebuild themselves as an electrician overnight. This is the cellular magic at the heart of the whole trick. The old adult body is not simply repaired. It is disassembled and its cells are reprogrammed, rebuilt into the younger form. And that ability to reshuffle its own cells so freely is what lets the animal escape the one-way street that traps the rest of us. And here's the crucial part, the part that earns it that dramatic name. It does not appear to be able to do this only once. As far as researchers can tell, Turritopsis dohrnii can repeat this cycle again and again. Grow up into an adult, hit a crisis, collapse back into a polyp, grow up once more, and repeat. There is no obvious built-in counter ticking down, no fixed number of restarts after which the trick stops working. That is why biologists describe it as biologically immortal. It means the animal has no set expiry date written into its body, no inevitable clock of aging that eventually runs out. In theory, a single lineage of these jellyfish could keep resetting itself indefinitely, escaping old age over and over across a span of time that, for such a tiny creature, is almost dizzying to think about. It is the closest thing the animal kingdom has to a genuine off-switch for growing old. But now we have to be honest, because this is where the word immortal becomes dangerous if we are not careful. Immortal does not mean invincible. It does not mean this jellyfish cannot be killed. It absolutely can. Out in the real ocean, most immortal jellyfish never get anywhere near their theoretical forever. They get eaten. Larger jellyfish, sea slugs, fish, and other hungry predators swallow them constantly, and no clever cellular trick can save a creature that has already been digested. They fall to disease. They can be destroyed by sudden shocks in their environment, by pollution, by simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Remember, this is an animal about 4.5 millimeters wide, with no brain and a body as fragile as a soap bubble. It is one of the most delicate things in the sea. So the immortality here is a very specific and very careful kind. It means the jellyfish can escape aging, the slow internal decline that kills the rest of us from the inside. It does not in any way mean it can escape death from the outside world. It has, in a sense, unlocked the ability to not die of old age, while remaining just as vulnerable as ever to everything else. Immortal, but absolutely still killable. Hold on to that distinction, because it is the single most misunderstood thing about this animal. There is one more twist to this story that makes the whole thing even harder to fully pin down. This little jellyfish is not staying quietly in one corner of the sea. Originally noticed in the warm waters of the Mediterranean, Turritopsis dohrnii has since turned up in oceans right around the world, from the coasts of Japan to the waters off the Atlantic and beyond. Scientists think it has been hitching rides across the planet in the ballast water that great cargo ships suck up in one port and dump in another, carrying tiny marine passengers thousands of miles from home. And because it is so small and so easy to overlook, it has almost certainly spread far more widely than anyone has managed to map. So the strange truth is that this age-defying creature is not some rare, isolated marvel hidden in a single lagoon. It may be drifting, resetting, and quietly refusing to grow old in seas all over the globe, right now, in numbers we cannot even properly count. An immortal, in a sense, that is also a silent world traveler. So if it is this tiny, this fragile, and this easy to eat, why do scientists care so much about it? Why has a 4.5 millimeter blob become one of the most studied animals in the entire ocean? The answer is that this jellyfish is quietly holding up a mirror to one of the oldest questions we have ever asked. Why do we age at all, and can anything be done about it? Every time this creature rewinds its own body, it is performing right in front of us, a living demonstration of a cell doing something we were taught cells cannot do, turning back the clock and becoming young again. If researchers can understand exactly how its cells rewrite themselves so cleanly, without the whole process spiraling out of control, it could teach us something genuinely valuable about our own bodies. It touches on the science of aging itself, on how tissues might one day be repaired or regrown after injury, and even, in a roundabout way, on cancer, because cancer is in its own dark way a story of cells that have broken their own rules and refuse to stop. The immortal jellyfish seems to break the rules too, but somehow safely and in a controlled, purposeful manner. Learning that difference, the difference between reckless cellular chaos and this precise, orderly reset, is exactly the kind of knowledge that could matter enormously to medicine. None of this means we are on the edge of human immortality. Let's be very clear about that. You are not built like a jellyfish. We are vastly more complicated, with brains and hearts and bones and trillions of cells locked into their roles. And there is no simple switch buried inside us waiting to be flipped. Nobody is about to collapse into a blob and grow young again. What this animal offers is not a cure, but a clue. A single, strange, living proof that aging is not some unbreakable law of the universe, that at least one creature on this planet has found a way around it. And when nature shows you that something you assumed was impossible is quietly happening in the sea every single day, it is worth paying very close attention. So let's return to that speck of glass drifting somewhere out in the dark ocean. A creature smaller than your fingernail, with no brain to think and no heart to beat, so fragile that a passing fish can end it in an instant. And yet hidden inside that tiny transparent body is one of the most extraordinary abilities we have ever discovered. When its world falls apart, it does not surrender. It reaches back into itself, rewrites its own cells, and begins again, as young as it ever was, ready to grow up, and if it must, start over one more time. It is not unkillable. It is not magic. It is simply an animal that, against every expectation, has learned how to refuse to grow old. And it has been doing it silently, in oceans all over the world, long before we ever noticed, and long before we understood. So here is what we would love to know from you. If you could hit reset the way this jellyfish does, if you could collapse and rebuild yourself young again, would you actually want to? Or is knowing the end part of what makes a life a life? Tell us in the comments. And if this tiny creature just changed the way you think about aging and death, stay with us. Because the natural world is full of impossible things that turn out, when you look closely enough, to be quietly and completely true.